Potential resources include UNM, School of Public Administration, Management of America, subject matter experts from NACO and the National League of Cities and ACLU, etc. LULAC has a number of our members that actually work with the community relations offices of the Department of Justice. And so their job many times is to negotiate MOUs, memorandums of understanding with police departments, and there are several that they have negotiated out of in Dallas and in Houston and various other cities across the country. So I'd like to also consider some of the MOUs that LULAC and the Department of Justice have negotiated with various mayors of various cities.
I think it would be very helpful if you could get that information and bring it to the task force. That would be great. And it's a good segue to item, yes?
2 points of information.
Okay.
One, is subcommittee membership restricted to members of the task force?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. That was yes for anybody who didn't hear it. And second, at 2 different points tonight, people have mentioned the potential intersection between the police contract or agreement with the city and police oversight ordinance or process. And clearly they obviously intersect, and they may or may not conflict. And I think that we're going to be facing questions, even if there's no issue now, we'll be facing questions when we make recommendations of what takes precedence when something conflicts, and how do we deal with when we're making a recommendation of how to deal with that. And what I would like to know is are there funds available to the task force to retain an expert in that area of law to advise the task force on when the city ordinance and a labor agreement intersect, how to determine which one takes precedence, whether, I don't know if it's whether first in time or, I don't know the answer. And I think we need to know. So are there funds to hire somebody to tell us that?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Wegman, I don't think we need funds. We've got members of the city attorney's office right now who work on labor management, labor relations issues. They can come make the
So
presentation.
we can bring in the expertise on this. Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to item 7, discussion of potential future task force briefings, which may include, and then there's a series of names there. So I'd like you to take a couple of minutes and review those names, and let me know if anyone has any other suggestions. Just bear in mind that we do have a very limited time, and we have a very difficult task. While you're looking at that and thinking about it, let me throw this on the table. I've kind of conceptualized our task into 2 different kinds of functions. One function is in the vein of theoretical. We need to gather a lot of information, past reports, best practices from around the country, outside speakers, etc. The other part of our process is going to be very practical. What are our recommendations, and how do we make sure that they're implemented? So we're going to have to balance those 2 things. There'll come a point in time when we're going to start to run out of time, and we can't keep taking in information without beginning to formulate some recommendations. So I just wanted to kind of conceptualize that for the task force, that we're in this kind of first phase. That's how I see it operating, where we're going to gather information, gather stuff from reports, and we may do that for a couple of months and then spend 2 months on actually crafting recommendations and crafting a process that's going to ensure the implementation of the recommendations. And we may get to that fairly quickly with summaries of recommendations that were made in the past. I don't know. But we're not there yet. We're still gathering information. Okay. Speakers.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, the point I wanted to make is that there is a lot of information that has been assembled over the years. And so we don't need to reinvent the wheel here.
Right.
You know, that's kind of the instruction that I got from the council, folks, is don't go reinvent the wheel. And there is no reason for it, for doing that. So, you know, I think we've got a lot of material that it's ready available. And we just need to kind of pull it together, and it looks like, Public Administration Department is, gonna help us do that, so that would be great.
Yeah, I've also asked them to, where one doesn't exist, some of the reports have executive summaries, some don't. So, to also prepare summaries of those reports, in addition to consolidating the recommendations, also make sure that we have summaries of the reports so that we can quickly get a handle on the breadth of a report, and we have the full reports if anyone wants to go into and look at the detail, or we want to in fact look at the detail, we can go back into it, but summaries will help us get through a lot of that volume of material. Okay, anybody else want to recommend any speakers, want to say anything about the speakers I've listed here?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I think based on Mr. Wagner's comments, we put the city attorney's office on there in terms of
Okay.
labor relations and
Let's add that,
understanding the
city attorney. And I'll put in parentheses, labor relations. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Yes, sir.
question. First two speakers that are listed here are from the POC.
Yes,
Now, will they be speaking separately, or will they come in as a
Separately.
team? And is the information that they're providing different, or is it consistent?
I believe it will be different. And they both requested to speak. And I don't, you know, I think it would be helpful to hear from them. I'm open really to hear from anybody, particularly people who have particular knowledge. All of the people listed here do. They have particular knowledge about particular things, and two of them are on the food service commission. Yes.
Following up on that point, I'm not familiar with these two gentlemen, so I don't know who's been on for a long time on the POC, a long time, meaning a few years, and who is new. One of the things that I would really like to hear, exactly on my point, is if either of these gentlemen were on the POC when the 2012 transmission was made to the city council and the POC about what they were recommending, any discussions they may have had, or knowledge they may have had about what was accepted or what was rejected.
John's shaking his head no, and that's my understanding as well. I think they're all new people. I think the whole Police Oversight Commission is new. Is that correct?
And Mr. Cameron and Mr. Siegel both, and Mr. Siegel's here today, are relatively new. They weren't here when they were doing this.
Well, then on that point, if we could possibly ask somebody who was on the POC in, January 27th, or whatever the date was in the transmittal.
We have a former chair. That might be the best
I
person.
would really like to know what their.
No? Okay. Maybe you
you
could
know,
recommend someone at our next meeting.
We'll look at who would be an appropriate person, who was there at that time.
Okay.
We've got the history and background.
Right.
All right, thank you. So I'm gonna add another little bullet here. Past person, or past member of POC. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a quick point on this list. It's a good list, but I'm assuming it's flexible and we can
Yes.
add, okay.
Absolutely. This is just a suggested starting point. I had to come up with something somewhere, and I wanted to bring in some speakers, so I put together some names. Mr. Ellis.
I'd like to recommend maybe someone from UNM or,
Well, we have staff from UNM, so we're well connected to UNM.
okay, good.
The department, the School of Public Administration is assisting us.
National League of Cities.
I
Mr.
would,
Delangelo.
I would welcome this talk, but essentially my talk, which I had planned to summarize to the city council, contained in those 20 pages of changes to the ordinance. The other thing that you talked about was the contract APOA has. The only relevant section in that contract is section 20, which talks about the handling of punishment of officers, the names of them and that sort of thing. That's essentially the key section, and I may be corrected, but having gone through that contract as relevant to the POC and your task, section 20 is the thing you ought to examine. And our issue has always been it should not conflict with the state laws such as the IPRA or anything like that. The state law should take precedence. If it does, then the contract has to be changed, not bending the rules to not comply with the IPRA. So section 20 is a relevant thing, and essentially if you read my 20 pages of changes to the ordinance, which I think should be done first, that essentially consists of my proposed recommendations and to eliminate the problem without going through the management report.
Thank you, Mr. Delangela. Let me comment that I guess you've already seen, you are one of the recommended
Yeah.
speakers. So this will save me a phone call to you to ask you to prepare a 10-minute talk or so that summarizes your recommendations. We have your full recommendations and we'll incorporate those as part of the document that I've asked for that brings together all of the recommendations. But we'd like to hear from you personally, and I want to give you 10, 12 minutes, whatever you need to make a full presentation to this task force. 15, fine. And we'll get in touch with you about a date. We'll probably
Thank
do
you,
this file
Mr.
letter.
Chairman.
Mr. Simonson.
I would make a recommendation to the potential speaker, maybe the executive director or the IRO of one of the more successful police oversights in another part of the country.
Good suggestion.
There are a number of them that are cited in the MGT reports, and I was just trying to comb through there to see if I could figure out which one might be the most appropriate, but I think someone should take the time to look through there and see what might be the best person to invite.
Okay.
New York City.
Let me comment
Yeah,
also
sure.
that the last week in September, I think it's a 4-day conference, I'm going to the national conference, I forget the name of the organization.
Nicole.
Yeah, but what's the? National.
Civilian Oversight of Police.
Is everyone hear that?
Of law enforcement, I'm sorry.
National Association
For
Civilian
oversight of law enforcement.
Oversight of Law Enforcement. They have a national conference every year. I looked at the workshops, and I think it'll be extremely useful. I may be able to make contact with someone from one of these cities. That's where the real value comes in, is talking to people actually directly. What kind of things do you experience, et cetera, in addition to the workshops. So I think that's a very good suggestion, and I'll make an effort to see if I can meet someone from, kind of the top cities, or what are perceived to be the top cities in the police oversight process.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
And this may be just a way to just summarize data, but I'd like to hear a little more from someone from risk management. What sorts of complaints, cases, payouts, things of that sort of they receive? and what
That's a
they
good
see
idea.
as
That's one of the
problem?
big problems, is risk management and the payouts the city has been making of taxpayers' money to settle things that probably shouldn't have happened. So let's add someone from risk management, if that's where that would come from. Any other suggestions? Okay, again, this is flexible, so, oh, sorry, Bruce.
I couldn't stay quiet the whole meeting. Mr. Chairman, and members of the task force, I think it might be helpful to try and think about your presenters with respect to what they're going to brief you on. You've styled these as briefings, and if the list is a bunch of individuals, then that's different than having a number of topics. And I don't think you obviously need to close this at the moment, and you can add to it, but I would say it's going to shorten the time frame for the committee to do its work if it identifies topics on which it needs briefings as it's going along, and then an appropriate individual can be sought to give them that briefing. It will shorten your information seeking. That's just an observation.
No, I think it's a good observation, and I think that very likely will happen. This list, if you look at it, is really based on a combination of the current folks in place, along with folks in that community who have made recommendations that deserve a hearing about it. So it's in that information gathering stage, and we may in fact need other speakers.
For example, you have representatives of APD, but just from the list, it's unclear to me if they're going to talk about training, use of force. We've had a lot of topics raised here, and those topics need to be teased out. We've heard about SOP, we've heard about adherence to standards, discipline for standards. Those things need to be teased out so you can collect your information quickly and reach recommendations.
It's a very good suggestion. There are two ways that we could possibly do this. Let me make this comment, Ms. Koenigsberg, and then maybe I'll answer your question. Two ways I can think of to do this. We can, at a future meeting, we're not going to do it tonight, hammer out subjects for these people, because when we invite them, we want to tell them what to talk about, obviously. I can ask staff to prepare a short summary for each of these people, and we can proceed that way. But in either case, we can come back to the next meeting with what these folks are going to talk about. But I want to start to schedule them pretty soon, so that's my suggestion.
I don't know if Nancy.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry,
Thanks.
you're right.
Yeah,
She's
I would
first,
like
and then-
to add, in terms of briefings, somebody to talk about de-escalation techniques of people with disabilities, people with mental illness, people with traumatic brain disorder. I mean, since so many of the people who've been the subject of use of force have not only been people of color, but people with disabilities, and that's a big issue in this community. I think we ought to have a briefing about that topic.
Okay. Anybody else? Peter?
I appreciate Mr. Perlman's comments, and I'm just wondering, what is the intersection between the management plan the work plan that you brought up that we should be working on, and scheduling of these speakers and the topics that they're going to address? I wonder if it would make sense for that management group, that planning group, to sort of come forward with a possible list of speakers and the subjects that they would address for the council, for the task force to consider.
I don't want to delay too much the scheduling of speakers. I think we need to get started with it pretty quickly. You could take that, what you just said, and incorporate it into the management plan, but I think we should keep moving in the meantime. I don't want to hold up, because if you look at this list of speakers, this beginning list of speakers, most of it's pretty obvious. I mean, I could articulate almost off the top of my head what each of these people is going to talk about. And we need to gather that information anyway. So I want to move forward with beginning with this list, and you can take that into account when you're working on the management report. Would that be acceptable?
I think there's no reason we couldn't do both at the same time. I can see us scheduling some of the obvious speakers at the same time that we're trying to schedule.
Right. Well, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Maybe just one more question. I want to focus in, or my focus really is on the problem of amplification. And looking over the resolution and the city ordinance, and there are a number of tasks and responsibilities that the current POC must follow. What I want to know is what's working and what's not working, and why is it working and why is it not working. And if we understand that part of it, then we need to zone in maybe on other speakers that we haven't thought of who have expertise in that particular area. So I'm not sure how we want to go about that by way of process.
I think that's the intent of both Mr. Cameron and Mr. Siegel. I think that they're, having served, even though for a short time, on the Police Oversight Commission, I think they're going to come to us and tell us some of the things that they're experiencing as problems. Am I correct, Mr. Siegel? Yes.
Can you obtain some empirical data with that information? Do we really want to hear their opinion, their thoughts? I'd like to see a little more empirical data supporting whatever their position might be, maybe by way of a brief with additional information, why they believe what they believe.
Okay. John?
Mr. Chairman, just a suggestion, something that maybe mentioned. The MGT report was a fairly comprehensive examination of the process. The POC commissioners, and they do their job well, and they're honorable people. They have their individual perspective. The MGT report interviewed multiple people, looked at the system from different perspectives. If I might, the MGT report from 2011 seems like it would be a good baseline to set the stage for all the rest, after which you could call in the commissioners, you could call in the IRO, you could call in the folks from internal affairs or training, and begin to sort of build a work plan around that baseline. So that would be my suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Good. Do our management planners hear that? Okay.
I would just have one question, and that is, does it make any sense for us to see some of the IRO reports? Because I understand that there are supposed to be quarterly reports that would get to some of the quantitative data that maybe you're.
I'm sure if there are reports generated, we can we get our hands on them.
Mr. Chairman, they're in the public record. I can get those to you fairly quickly.
Good enough. Very good. Okay, I'm going to move on. We're at number 8, review of first town hall and discussion of notice and publicity for future town hall meetings. So I'm going to open the floor. Let's start first with anything anyone would like to say, other than the turnout was low, because we're going to deal with that in the second half of this same thing. So other observations from the first town hall meeting, Mr. Arons.
After our first town hall meeting, and it's true that people are afraid to speak up. And after our town hall meeting, an individual came up to me and said, you know, one of the things that we need to change is that people don't even realize or don't even know that the Police Oversight Commission exists. There's a person on the street, gets accused of something, gets arrested, gets booked, gets thrown to jail. The next day or two or whatever, they see the judge, they say, okay, you know, this is your bond, you're gonna go to trial, whatnot, whatever the judge tells them. But people don't ever really hear in the public that there's a Police Oversight Commission or a process. So how do we go about changing that? The individual asked me, and I said, well, that's a good question. Why didn't you ask? I said, well, I didn't want to ask. But that's what I'm bringing forward here, is that a lot of the public don't realize that this is a part of the process that they have a right to pursue.
That's one of the big criticisms that is relayed in the recommendations, that it's not marketed well either not marketed well by the city administration and not marketed well by the police department, and they both have a responsibility to do that. So it's one of the things that we'll look at, because I know it's a recommendation that came out of prior reports. That, but you're right, the public doesn't know that there's an oversight process and that they can complain.
And then he also said that they only have 90 days from the point of their
Right.
arrest.
So it has to be marketed better, and I know that'll come out in our recommendations.
Right.
So thank you for raising that. Other comments about the first town hall in general? I'll just say I thought it went well, and moved right to the low turnout. So I want to talk about notice and publicity for future town halls and the meetings of this task force. Jessica, maybe you can tell us about the publicity that's commonly done. Before I give you the floor, I want you to comment about how the information is distributed to neighborhood associations. Because I know you told me it was distributed, and I know of 3 cases where the neighborhood associations told us they did not get it. So I don't know where the breakdown is there. But let's hear about the big picture, and then we'll discuss it a little.
Sure.
Thank you.
The first thing that we do, just as a city council, and the way we do our city council meetings, is we publish it downstairs in the base, not in the base, by the Plaza Eatery, and then we put it online, and there's that public notice there. Particular to this task force, we posted it throughout City Hall, posted it online on the POC website. We've also posted it and sent it, Julian and I sent it to each of the policy analysts representing all of the 9 council districts, to their analysts. The analysts then disseminated it to their coalitions. Coalitions then disseminated it to their neighborhood associations. And then as we discussed at the first meeting, a lot of neighborhood associations apparently didn't get the notice. So what Julian and I did was got with the Office of Neighborhood Coordination, got the neighborhood association list, and then resent out the flyer with the information. At that point, it's up to the neighborhood associations to get it out to its members. We can't do that for ourselves.
No, but I
So-
appreciate that you short-circuited it, because I was gonna ask you, how do you know, once you hand it off,
Right.
that it gets done? So if it rests with you, you'll know that it gets done. That's a good thing.
Sure, and so that's been the totality of our efforts of getting this out, and it's.
Senior centers.
Oh, yes, and then we've also posted the flyer and the notice in all of the city senior centers and then community centers as well.
Okay, let me suggest this. The piece that is real, I will call on you, I saw your hand. I think the piece that is really missing, and it's the one place where people will see it. All those other things, they may very well say they didn't see it, or the neighborhood association president decided not to hand it out. I know I emailed it directly to my association president, and he sent it out. The thing that's missing, I think, is the television and the newspaper.
Right.
Oh, I forgot to mention that, we did send out a press release.
Right.
It was sent to, I know Channel 7, put it on their news blitz that they had. And then also our meeting, unfortunately, was so short last time that by the time the media showed up, Channel 13, I believe Channel 4, the meeting was over. So they had nothing to report on. So they showed up, they were there.
Came too late. Okay, let me get some input from my task force members, Nancy and,
I appreciate that, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That goes to the point of making sure that there's not enough advance notice, because we ended up with a very short time, and whatever, and I should know this off the top of my head, whatever the notice is required, I mean, I guess the notice required for the meetings is only 72 hours. Is it not? I think we need to be looking at a
But we
week
post
ahead.
this ahead of time for 10 days.
Yeah, the Open Meetings Act resolution.
Well, thank you, for 10 days. So for each of these meetings, so for example, we have another one next week, so the notice for that should have already gone
It's
out.
already gone out.
Okay, so so has that gone out also to television stations on the radio stations, or has it been circulated in the various governmental departments that you just described?
Mostly among the governmental organizations that we just discussed. We typically don't notify the media until the day of or the day before, so that way they can get it on their tracker. If you have another suggestion, we can try that as well.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry,
No,
Jessica.
go ahead.
When the council sends out a press release, we send out a press release to all the media organizations in the city. We send it to all of the TV stations, virtually all of the radio stations, and the print press. So when that press release goes out with those town hall dates and task force dates, it goes to everybody.
okay, let me make a suggestion, and you and I have talked about this, so I'm gonna put it on the table for everybody to hear. The press releases are fine, and we should do all of the things that you're doing, no question about it. But press releases, they can choose to run or not run. The same thing is gonna be true of what I'm about to suggest, but I think it carries a different kind of weight. And that's to do some radio interviews and to call a press conference where we invite the media to come, and I'll say a few words to them, asking the public to come, inviting the public to come, etc. So I want to take that step. The other thing that we talked about is, I think I can say this publicly, the city staff has some friends at the media. That maybe you could call in favors and ask them to run information about these upcoming meetings. I think this is a very, very important issue, and it's worth calling in some chits to get people to these upcoming meetings. So I'm going to ask that you try and do that. Now, I think somebody had their hand raised, so let me call on the people and then I'll come back to you.
And I just had a similar point, is that if there's a way we could create partnerships, I know it's very PSA of some sort, I know sometimes they will do that, but, I leave that up to the experts, if we can get.
They run those at 3 in the morning.
In addition, maybe we can do a little more, instead of expecting the community to come to us, maybe we should go to the community, try to come up with some options. I know neighborhood associations have meetings all the time, coalitions have meetings all the time. Maybe we could ask if it's gonna work for the committee here, that we're a part, that we go to them instead of them coming to us. And there might be some events out there that might make it a little easier for us.
I'm willing to do that. There was someone who had their hand raised, yes.
I'd like to suggest we try to get a list of not-for-profit organizations and advocacy organizations who can then distribute to their members, because they typically assist marginalized populations. And if we
Right.
could let them know.
Actually, I did. I sent it to the Peace and Justice Center. They have, I don't know, 50, 60 organizations on their list, all of which are nonprofits and, I don't know how to describe them, but I tapped into that list.
Charitable.
Yeah. So I'll make sure that I do that. Again, and I think I've sent it to you as well, the email address for the Peace and Justice Center.
I'm thinking domestic violence, veterans, any of those.
I think those are all good. If we can put somebody on that to put together a list, we'll distribute it. Mr.
Mr.
Delahan.
Chairman, you hit the nail on the head. That we see changes in the printed newspapers on zoning changes, everything from roundabouts to the narrowing of bike lanes and things like that. This internet stuff is all good, and contacting Office of Neighborhood Coordination is all good. Was a neighborhood president, still a member, never got a notice through the neighborhood association. Spend some money and put it in the newspaper, just like we do with zoning changes, public meetings. They're having a public meeting tonight on the roundabout up on Rio Grande and Candelaria. That's a public meeting, and they published it. Spend some money,
Run an ad.
run an ad in the newspaper,
Okay,
and
we'll look into
still,
that.
it doesn't negate doing the rest of it, but,
Right,
let's not forget that, please.
okay, thank you.
Andrew, this is Al. Can I make a comment?
Sure. Oh, you're there. Okay,
Yes,
go ahead.
A couple of people mentioned at the town hall that, or they compared the turnout or response to the DOJ public meetings to the one we had. Maybe somebody from the city staff could get in contact with whatever person organizes the analogous DOJ meetings and ask if they have some other way of publicizing the meeting that we're not doing, or if they could help us to do that, because I think 2 people mentioned that.
Okay.
That might be one thing to look into.
I have staff shaking their head. I believe DOJ came to the city, distributed through the neighborhood associations, but we'll look into that. We'll have someone contact DOJ and find out how they publicized it. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay.
Yes,
I'd like to add that not everyone belongs to a neighborhood association,
right?
and they're not all that good about getting information out to everyone in the neighborhood, so you shouldn't depend on neighborhoods. I know I'm
Well,
in
we're
my
not.
neighborhood association,
Yeah,
and I think it's a very good idea to put something in the Albuquerque Journal.
Right.
Or the Alibis, I was hearing people mention, I don't
Yeah.
read the Alibi, but
the alibi would be great.
I was very disappointed that I didn't see something in the Albuquerque Journal. The first I heard about it was on Channel 7 in the morning, and I think, it's a very good idea, pay for an article, whatever, but a big article that lets them know we're working on these issues. Evidently, the Journal thought it was important to talk about all the police problems. Well, we're trying to
Okay.
reach a solution, so yes.
I'm gonna move, yes?
Yeah, just one quick comment. Those are all good suggestions,
Yeah.
but, we're not on the radar screen of the TV stations, radio station and so on. I had a very short suggestion at the top of my little write-up that said, do radio call-in shows. I mean, I think that you can start generating a
Right.
buzz in the community by using that method.
Okay. I think we've kind of covered it. I'm gonna move.
I just want to make one
If,
quick.
if it's something that hasn't already been said,
On the city website, the
Yeah.
home page, there are tiles. One of those tiles says Town Hall.
ain't there. You're talking about town hall meetings, right?
Right.
Where are they? There's a tile on the home page that says town hall.
Do you guys know what he's talking about?
I do, I think that might be particularly for the mayor and the administration's town halls. No, I'm pretty certain that's what that link is for, so you have to go to city council and then come to ours.
See, have you guys tried to negotiate where your information is?
No, it's my understanding is that it's all on our page. The
It's under
police
the city-
oversight
it's under
task
the
force.
city council current projects.
Yes, that's where it is.
Who's gonna look for it there?
Well, that's why I think it needs to be in the newspaper and on TV.
Right, that's what we're, newspaper.
I mean, and several
front- the
people
front
after I
line
said
of
that
it.
echoed the same thing, so we're gonna work on that. We'll try and get it in the newspaper and on TV. Okay, moving on. Report on virtual town hall. Dr. Perlman, that's you.
This is actually, turns out to be apropos, may I?
Please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, you know, we've discussed the notion of virtual town hall, and I may, since this, my remarks will extend actually what we were just talking about, which is publicity for the town halls.
Quickly, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we've
I'm
developed
running
some,
behind.
we've developed some options for virtual town halls, and I can give you what they are fairly quickly, but you'll have to make a decision on them and move them along. The amount of information that we can pin down with respect to costs are determined by dates and times, but a couple are particularly apropos for what you're talking about. So let me run over them real quickly. One is the message board, which we just discussed first. That would basically be a live posting for citizens, which they'd be able to access for, say, up to 72 hours, make comments, and post. They'd have to post comments and then post comments on comments. People who've used this know what I'm talking about. If you don't, I can probably direct you to some discussion board for use. That's one thing that can be used no matter what else you use. There are a couple of other options. One is a call-in with UNM telecom service, and that would entail having the task force in a room or a studio, and calls would come in from all over the city, and you'd be able to answer them as you answer them now live. You wouldn't have to pick up the phone and do that. You'd be able to just speak. That's not that's a reasonably costly option, a couple $1,000 to get it all set up, but that's several hours worth of calling from all over the city. There's a cheaper way of doing that, but that depends upon nailing down the times and getting a cloud service which would host this through the internet. But these are both call-in options. You would be sitting in front of a speaker phone, folks would be queuing up and calling in, and they would identify themselves and ask you questions from all over the city. They wouldn't have to go anywhere. You would probably have to go somewhere. It would not be possible to do multiple point-to-point where you're all on your individual phones and talking to them. You have to get all of you in one place. The other two options which are interesting is one is K&ME, which is sort of like the telethons. You know, you could go down there. You wouldn't be on TV. We don't have any programming slots. But we could actually tape that and broadcast it later or webcast it. But an interesting option, which is virtually free, is to make you into a KUNM radio program. And there are two ways to do that. One way, which actually speaks to what you were just talking about, is to try and get on a weekly Thursday 8 a.m. call-in show. And we could get all of you, or some of you, or however you want to set it up. I've been unable to get a hold of Elaine Baumgartner, who's the program director who staffs that show. But every Thursday, 8 a.m., citizens call in, and if she's interested, we could get you on that. The other thing which we can also do for a larger town hall, and as I say, these are virtually free, is there is a program that is free in October and November, which the fellow who runs it only schedules about 3 weeks in advance. So with 3 weeks notice, we could give some notice on the air, get you all there in the studio, and have folks call in for a virtual town hall. In essence, that's free or virtually free. I don't know, there's always hidden costs in this stuff, but it's virtually free because you're becoming a program for KUNM, and they've got to fill these slots anyway, so that's what we're doing. But if I can get a hold of Elaine Baumgartel, the program director, she might be able to book you fairly soon, depending on what else she has programmed on Thursday morning, 8 a.m. call-in show, and that might help publicize some of the town halls. That might not be the virtual town hall unless you all show up for that, but it might be an interim solution. That constitutes my report. I'll stand for questions.
Questions?
I do.
Yeah.
So will we be taking calls as well as emails, as well as all mediums of communication on this virtual town hall?
That's,
I think it's only call.
Chairwoman, Mr. Arianes, that's your call, if I can make a pun. You could have a discussion board and still have some of these other things. But it's very likely that during the live or taped events, it would all be by voice. You probably wouldn't be taking emails. But the discussion board could be running, you could run that for a week or a day or 2 hours and still have the other things. So those are not mutually exclusive.
Okay.
Let me make a suggestion. First of all, for everyone's edification, we already have live, I think it went up within the last 24 to 48 hours, a comment link on our page on the website, the City Council website. So there is a way currently for people to respond, but it's not email, it's a comment link on the City Council page. So there is a way for people to do that on their own time, at their own convenience, and that's already live. I'm going to express my own preference and then open it up for discussion again. I like the inexpensive suggestion of KUNM program slot further, that it could be taped and run again later. I think that's a really good suggestion. In other words, we would have a town hall meeting, but people could call in from all over the city. We would have to be there. And it would be taped and could be posted on our website for future people to see as well.
Actually, KUNM would post it on their website, and they have essentially what amounts to a podcast. And I think they also have a Twitter feed at the same time. So if you're,
That's good too.
you know, if you Twitter, or tweet, I guess is what we
Yes, tweet.
which I don't, then you might favor that.
How do you work at the university?
I can't do
Sorry,
all.
I shouldn't have even said that. Yes, yeah.
A couple of things that are connected here. Back to this gentleman's point about great to have this live place where people can comment on the city website, but getting to the point on the city website to even be able to do that, apparently, trying to maneuver that is a problem. So how to...
It's really very easy.
Making people aware that that's there is I think...
That's another matter.
Is another matter, which is part of what we're trying to do. KUNM, I listen to the call-in shows all the time. I'm concerned that as good an idea as that is, and I think we should do that. There are so many other media outlets that would need to be involved, communities that we want to reach. KUNM is a specific kind of a community, and we've got, as been made really, really clear, that we need to be reaching the communities who are not sitting in this room, the communities who are not represented on this board. So that's my concern, is how do we make those other contacts with other radio stations, and other communities. So, and I will tell you, I'm not familiar, with Spanish language or the KANW. There are other stations, other places that we need to be letting people know that we exist, or maybe could have a town hall like that. Third, and this is again, a more narrow constituency, but I was actually approached by some of the people that we work with, that people with mental illness, may, if they have access to the internet, would probably do some of a board, but I had actually asked if we could set up somehow either an opportunity to just record a conversation that they could have in a safe drop-in center here in town where folks go, or have a town hall particular for that community, some of whom are homeless, some of whom are vets who work through St. Martin's, and there's a small cafe on Second Street in Lomas that has a community center. So wondering about the ability to have an opportunity for people to come where they feel safe. It's not a big crowd and not a big public place. And I don't know if that would be possible in this context.
Okay,
That's a suggestion.
let me comment on that, and then I'll call on you, Peter. I think reaching particular constituencies, I think, to be honest with you, I think comes back to us. So, some of the people on this task force, like yourself, are connected to particular constituencies. That's why I made the comment about that I did about my distributing it to the Peace and Justice Center to make sure it went out to all those organizations. I think we need to take some responsibility too to help distribute this information to the constituencies that we have contact with. So I'm going to ask you to do that. I don't think it's a practical suggestion to try and have more town halls with particular constituencies. I think that it would become unwieldy. But we could try and reach out to particular constituencies and make them aware that there's an online comment page for people who can't get out, and make them aware of the upcoming task force meetings, town hall meetings, and once we make a decision about the virtual one, to make them aware of that. But that really, like I said, repeating myself, that falls on us. I think that we have a better knowledge of particular constituencies and how to reach them. Like you said, you spoke to someone. Well, if you could relay back to that person the flyer,
Sure.
and ask them to distribute it to everybody that they know, that really helps. Okay, Peter.
Just quickly, our organization has done live streaming town hall meetings before. You may have used GoToMeeting, it may have been another service. That was pretty easy. It seemed to me that folks were able to post questions either in a chat board, in an immediate format, or call in, and there was a call number associated with the live meeting, just live streamed the event. And I can't remember now, maybe I'm getting tired, but I can't remember if you actually mentioned that option, but I know that for us that was pretty effective in having live exchange with people over the internet. And if they didn't have enough bandwidth to do audio, they could just get the chat board.
Yeah, please.
Mr. Chairman, Member Simonson. Yeah, we have that available, whether it be through GoToMeeting or there are ways to do that through UNM's Learn facility. The difficulty is that it takes some sophistication on the part of the user to access it, and that was essentially why, two reasons. That was one reason why I didn't report on that. Second one was actually cost. It's considerably more costly than some of these others. And I don't know, in using GoToMeeting or GoToMyPC or Skype, some of the other services, but they have limits on the amount of people that can get in and queue up. Some of those might be feasible, and they're actually very nice. It's just that they're technically more sophisticated, and that is really the only reason that I didn't bring up any of those. So we have a piece of Collaborate software, which is really pretty neat. You can see me, and I can see all of you, but it does take your ability to make sure that you can use Java on your computer. And if someone can't do that, they're going to be frozen out. So I kind of shied away from that. However, if it's the pleasure of the task force that we investigate those further, we have those at our disposal and we can use them. That's a good point.
Well, let me suggest this. In the interest of time, If you could do a little investigation of that, those are good points that you made, so I don't know if you want to withdraw your suggestion, Peter, or you want.
Yeah, I happily will withdraw.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna suggest that you look into the KUNM solution and come back to us with maybe some potential dates and more how that would work. Because that sounds like a pretty relatively easy suggestion to me and something that we could do. We would just have a town hall, if I understand this correctly, at the KUNM studios. People could call in like they do to make a pledge. There would be some people manning the phones. And we would conduct it, and it would then be taped and streamed on the KUNM website. And we could put that information on our website, that a town hall is being streamed and a link to that.
That's correct, and if it is the desire of the task force, that we try and access the 8 AM show for, would not be a town hall per se. It would be, it would probably be just an interview about the task force's work. That might be a way to get out. You could have all the task force, several members, or whoever was interested. That's a call-in show as well. That's at 8 AM on Thursdays. And if there's a hole there, if the person that runs it has some schedule time, that's just a way of getting more publicity out about the task force work. And I'm sensitive to Member Konigsberg's comments about, that's not the only community you want to reach out to. Unfortunately, it's the only one I have information.
Okay, so let's do that.
Andrew, sorry, this is Hans
Yeah,
again.
go ahead, Hans.
I just wanted to say, I think it's a great idea to try and get on the 8 AM call-in show. It's gonna, they're gonna automatically publicize us being on the show, which is great. They do some of the work for us in terms of getting the word out that we're doing this work in general. And gonna be on the call-in show. I don't think it's simultaneously pretty low tech, and that all you have to do is turn on the radio and listen to this. You can phone in if you want. And I think also that you can email or tweet into the program, and the person who's in charge of the show will read in some of those communications. So I
Sounds
think
great.
it's great. Yeah.
I'll find out if that's available. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Hans. We'll look into it, and Bruce will come back with more specific information about that option. So I'm going to move on to item 10 now, discussion of procedural issues. The first one is interaction with the media. I feel very strongly about this, that as we move forward, and if we do a press conference, or the media shows up at a town hall and they want comments, or the newspaper calls, there needs to be one spokesperson from this task force. I can assure you we will have mayhem if we don't do that. I'm not so worried about all of you, I'm more concerned with the media. The media will pick people off on this task force, ask, funky questions, and try and disrupt our work. And I do not want that to happen. So I don't want people speaking off the cuff to the press or making statements to the press individually. I think that's a very, very dangerous precedent and a slippery slope. So I'm going to ask for a motion, and then we can discuss it, that I, as chair, be the spokesperson for the task force. And that if anyone else is called and asked for a comment from the press, you refer them to me. I'll stop at that point. I don't think I can make a motion, so I need someone to make that motion.
Motion to approve.
The motion's been made. Could you put it in the form of a motion, please?
That any interaction with the media go through the chairperson.
Okay, is there a second?
Yes.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Now it's open for discussion.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Aria.
At our last town hall, I was asked questions by Univision. So are you able to conduct an an interview with Univision in Spanish?
No, I would ask them to ask me the questions in English, or I might call upon you to co-do the interview with me. But I'd ask that you not do it on your own in Spanish. That if Univision shows up and they want a statement, or they call you and they want a statement, that we arrange to see them together, so that, again, we have kind of one message, and you and I can talk about that, what we say to them if a request like that comes through. But no, I don't speak fluent Spanish, so I wouldn't be able to do that, but I can enlist your help.
Okay.
Anyone else? Peter?
Well, speaking on behalf of an organization that supports the First Amendment, I just some ambivalence about the motion. I suppose, I think of the analogous situation of the city council, which also has important business to conduct, also has to be coordinated in its agenda, and yet, obviously, city councilors talk independently to the media, and we would want them to. I guess, part of me is I understand the desire to speak with one voice. We don't want to be taken off our track. But at the same time, I think there's a diversity of opinions on this task force about the role of the Oversight Commission, of the efficacy of it, of how it could be improved or not. And the outcome of this task force will be the collective calculation of all of those opinions. So I guess I do have some reservations about your motion.
Okay, let me respond to that, and then I'll call on you. First of all, I want to distinguish very differently our work from the city council. The city councilors are elected officials. They have to be out in the media. They're looking to get reelected or elected, etc. We are an ad hoc task force charged with a very specific task. We're not here to make comments globally about a lot of different things like city councilors are. We're tasked with a very specific job. I'm sensitive to the is it a civil rights issue? Civil liberties issue. But there's a very real danger here, and it goes back to the last thing that you said, and that's that there are a variety of opinions on this task force. And that's the very thing I'm worried about. I know that going in. I know that those sitting on the task force come from different perspectives. That's exactly the kind of thing that the press will take advantage of, and it will break down our work, I can assure you. They will look to see if we come out with some decision, well, there's such and such who sits on that, and I know they think differently. Let me go interview them so we can get some action going. And that's the problem with that.
My question is, what's wrong with that? We're trying to generate some excitement. We're trying to get the juices flowing. We want to get the community excited about this issue. And what's wrong with the community hearing different voices, different perspectives, even if it becomes a little bit...
Okay, let me respond to that. That's what the task force meetings are for. And those are public, and they're taped, and they'll be made available publicly. We can have all the discussion we want, we can disagree with each other, we can argue, we can fight within our task force. I just don't want it to play out in the media, on the TV news, and on the front pages of the newspaper. It can play out within the confines of this meeting, but trust me, the media, the newspaper reporters, some TV news reporter who wants to make a name for himself is going to pick you guys off and look to generate some enthusiasm, like you're saying, but it can be very destructive. I'm really concerned about that.
I think so much depends on how we look at our roles. If we're speaking on behalf of a constituency, if that's who we're representing, there is that First Amendment issue that we really need to consider. But if we're some sort of closed-knit group, and we're not really speaking for ourselves, we're speaking for the task force, I guess maybe that's another issue. And I think we just need to decide who are we speaking for, where are our ideas and our advice, our opinions, and our positions coming from? Are they coming from as a representative of the community, as a member of the community, or more narrowly as a task force?
Okay, let me think about that for a minute, because because I have a response, but I want to think about it for a minute, take any other comments anyone wants to make.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, I am uncomfortable with the motion as well. I think democracy is a messy business, okay? And so that's what we're doing here. We're coming up with some recommendations on some specific stuff, but I'm not ready to give up, not that I want to go out to the media and make big statements, but I'm not ready to just sort of say, okay, we're just going to be corralled into one system in terms of public relations or anything else. I'm uncomfortable, frankly, with, and I understand the public, whatever it is, act that we are not allowed to communicate off of the public thing. I understand that, but it really straps me as an individual. I don't like it. I would respect it because that's the law, but I don't particularly care for this. So I would not agree to something that is actually not law, to actually do that voluntarily.
Other
Mr. Chair,
comments?
Mr. Chair, already we've been highly criticized about not having enough diversity on this task force, or not having enough of certain groups in the community on our task force. And, I think it's important to respond in certain ways about diversity of thought, diversity of opinion. For example, I represent a constituency, a statewide constituency, LULAC. And I know that I was selected in part because of the constituency that I represent. I don't think that denying my constituency, where I'm coming from as LULAC on this task force, would serve any justice for this task force.
Let me make myself clear. I'm not denying access to your constituency or anybody else's constituency. All I'm trying